Hello and welcome to Time About the Movies Flashback. Today we're flashing back to July 25th, 1986 with 4 movies to look at. Most of them were underwhelming movies, especially considering the caliber of talent on board on most of these movies. But then you have that one movie that was silly, fun, over-the-top goofiness from the master of that, Stephen King. But we'll get to that a little bit later on here. But let's just go ahead and jump on into it. Let's start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, and easily the most high-profile release. I mean, you've got a movie with Meryl Streep and Jack Nicholson as a couple. It's a romantic comedy drama directed and produced by Mike Nichols and written by Nora Ephron based on her novel. This is the first time that Nichols, Ephron, and Streep had worked together since Silkwood a few years prior to this, so naturally this has to be a hit, right?
Don't look in an obvious way, okay?
Mark Foreman.
Is he single? He's famous for it. I don't believe in marriage.
Neither do I.
The minute you get married, you start to drive each other crazy.
For 20 years, he's been terrible to women.
You're the only person he's ever treated decently.
It's marriage.
Not exactly. Like I said, this is based off a novel by Nora Ephron, which is a semi-autobiographical account of her marriage to Carl Bernstein, and it essentially follows the story of this Manhattan food writer played by Meryl Streep, who falls in love with this Washington, D.C. political columnist played by Jack Nicholson, and they get married. She gets pregnant. They buy a house, and it's one of these comedies where you have these two building a family together, and that's pretty much about it. And you can kind of see where the problem with the movie is in general. There is a lot of good, talented people involved in this movie. You got Stockard Channing in here as well. You see Jeff Daniels a little bit there, Catherine O'Hara, Stephen Hill, Mamie Gummer, Joanna Gleason, Milos Forman, who just 2 years prior had directed an Oscar winner in Amadeus, Anna Maria Horsford, Mercedes Ruehl, Dana Ivey. This is actually the first film you see Kevin Spacey and Natasha Lyonne. Songs by Carly Simon. I mean, this movie should have been an all-around winner, but that's kind of the problem with the movie. It's a movie where you have everything coming together in terms of the casting and all that, but other than that, though, that's about it. The rest of the story as a whole is just kind of generic. I mean, there's nothing that engaging about it in general, and it feels like a watered-down version of something like She's Having a Baby, pretty much, where it's basically the same format, except that one has John Hughes invested writing into it, and that one worked better than this, and this one just doesn't work in general. And Jack Nicholson and Meryl Streep had worked on a couple of films in the 80s that were successes. I mean, technically, it was after this, because the movie I'm thinking of that they worked together again was Ironweed, which came out the year after this. Didn't meet the same caliber of success as their other movies had done, but at least that one had a gimmick to it. This one is literally just, it's Meryl Streep and Jack Nicholson forming a relationship together, and I mean, that's about it in general. In a way, it's kind of a watered-down version of something like Terms of Endearment, pretty much, too. Because there's still a ton of different movies from Jack Nicholson and Paramount in general. And considering that Mike Nichols was still a very reliable name around this time, and had just directed Streep in Silkwood, and also had done stuff like, of course, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, The Graduate, Catch-22. I mean, he wasn't a hack director at this point in time. He was still a capable director. In fact, most of the movies he's done, there was never really a downward stretch for him in general. There's been some movies that weren't great, like What Planet Are You From is one of those examples, but yeah, this is one of those ones where it really wasn't his best stuff coming together. It really wasn't the fault of the actors overall. Just the script in general was just kind of bland. It had nothing really exciting or new to say about it in general. And it just kind of felt like there needed to be something, a little bit of an oomph to it, to give it that edge that it needed. And it just sadly wasn't there with this movie. A lot of people in this, a lot of people that should work in this, but it just doesn't in general. And most of it comes back to that script in general. And this was Nora Ephron's second script she ever written, but she would eventually get better as time would go on. But this definitely was one of her lesser films, so yeah. Sadly, a disappointing negative review for Heartburn. So, but it's okay though. Stephen King is around to kind of brighten the mood up a little bit here with his film Maximum Overdrive.
My name is Stephen King. I've written several motion pictures, but I want to tell you about a movie called Maximum Overdrive, which is the first one I've directed. Wow. I'm gonna scare the hell out of you.
I wouldn't say you scared the hell out of us, but you did make a hell of a movie. I mean, Maximum Overdrive is the film that Stephen King wrote and directed in his only directorial effort. He has since gone on to disown the film and described it as a moron movie and considered the process a learning experience, after which he never intended to direct again. Which it is kind of that, but it's still a ton of fun though. This is based off of his short story Trucks, which was included in the author's first collection of short stories, Night Shifts, and follows the events after all machines, including trucks, radios, arcade games, vending machines, etc., become sentient when Earth crosses the tail of a comet, initiating a worldwide killing spree. And you have a cast that includes Emilio Estevez, you have Pat Hingle in here, Yardley Smith, Lisa Simpson from The Simpsons. This was right after she had been in The Adventures of Billie Jean King a couple years prior to this, but yeah, this movie is not a movie that is very smart in general, but goddamn, it's a ton of fun to watch. You could tell that they put a lot of effort into this movie, from the way the trucks look, from the way the kills look. I mean, there are some fun over the top kills. This movie shows no mercy, including flattening a kid in a baseball diamond, and that's just, I mean, it's just one of those movies where you really need to appreciate the absurdity of this movie to really admire it for what it is. It's a film that is so crazy, so ridiculous, but it's a ton of fun all across the board. I mean, not much more to really say about that one. That's Maximum Overdrive. So let's go ahead and move on to our next movie. That's Gene Wilder, Gilda Radner, and Dom DeLuise in the horror comedy Haunted Honeymoon.
It should have been the happiest moment of their lives, the night they came home to be married at the house of Great Aunt Kate. But it turned into a haunted honeymoon.
So in this movie, you have Gene Wilder, who's a speaker in the radio horror shows of Manhattan Mystery Theater, who wants to marry. And for the marriage, he takes his fiancée, played by Gilda Radner, home to the castle where he grew up, among his eccentric relatives. His uncle decides that he needs to be cured from a neurotic speech defect and exaggerated bursts of fear. He gives him shock therapy with Palace Ghost. And you can see the idea of this movie as a whole, but that's really what it is, an idea. And the film overall, kind of a misfire on so many levels. I mean, this isn't nothing but trouble bad, but it's pretty close. I mean, it's a movie where you have a lot of ambition to it. A good cast that also includes Dom DeLuise and also Jonathan Pryce among the cast. And, you know, again, a lot of good ideas, but just a poor execution all across the board. And for Gene Wilder to go out as this with his last film as a director, and this to be the final film appearance of Gilda Radner, I mean, you expect so much better from it in general. And there are times when there is ambition to it, but it really misses the mark altogether, simply because there's just way too many... I mean, there's just way too many times when the film can't really find an identity for what they're trying to accomplish here. Like, what kind of a horror comedy is this trying to be? And it just never really feels like it got to that point there. And even the studio really felt like it was dead on arrival. They had been promoting this for a month, and then the film comes out, doesn't do well, and it's gone within a week of release. Like, they didn't even let it even bother trying to get people to come out to the seats in general to see if it worked. And it just ended up flopping altogether, and for this to be the last thing to be associated with Gilda Radner before she passed away, I mean, it's a shame, because there was definitely a lot of optimism and opportunity with this film in general, but some people also had said that there was also an idea that because Clue had flopped the year before, and then there was another comedy that came out early in the 80s called The Private Eyes with Tim Conway and Don Knotts, this period murder mystery comedy era that I guess there was, really wasn't a norm in general, and something that could be seen as something that could be a hit in general. Because there was another movie similar to this with Radioland Murders that came out in the 1990s, produced by George Lucas, that wasn't that great overall. But I mean, there's possibilities here. I mean, like I said, it's not a terrible movie. It's just a misinformed movie, a movie that can't really figure out the direction it wants to go with here. You got an idea where they got a mystery where somebody could be a werewolf, and there's never really any sense of that happening until they kind of spell it out for you. Just kind of like, it's all over the place. It's a movie that doesn't feel like it has a direction of where it wants to go, and it really kind of suffers because of it. So much optimism, so much potential to it, but it just never really came together in the end, So with all that said, let's go ahead and move on to the last movie that we have here, Anthony Michael Hall in Out of Bounds.
Left Iowa for a summer in L.A., but the locals aren't too friendly.
Nice of you to drop in.
The women are a little strange,
I'm gonna be here all summer.
Could turn out to be a real hot one.
and the nightlife can be murder.
Oh, that was intense.
Anthony Michael Hall, Out of Bounds, rated R.
Another movie that kind of feels like they had no idea how to sell it because Anthony Michael Hall was still on Saturday Night Live when this movie was getting made. So, I mean, but he had already been in films like Weird Science before this, and then and before that, Vacation. But this, yeah, this definitely felt like a film that was all over the place in terms of what they were trying to get across. But in the movie, Daryl Cage is an Iowa farm boy whose parents sent him to Los Angeles to live with his brother following their divorce. At the airport, Daryl's suitcase is switched by a drug kingpin that's full of heroin. The gangster's boss kills Cage's brother and his living girlfriend, but Daryl is framed for the crime. He then becomes the prime suspect for the murder, but decides to clear his own name. And again, kind of another problem with a movie that has an idea that we've kind of seen done to death before, the whole thing about the mistaken identity thing, the North by Northwest syndrome. And you got a director like Richard Tuggle, who had worked with a couple of Clint Eastwood movies, Tightrope and also Escape from Alcatraz, which are much better movies in general. But this film, yeah, this is one where it mostly didn't work because of a couple of reasons. Mostly associating with Anthony Michael Hall, who is not a bad actor, but he was way too young, one, to be playing this role in general here, but two, keep in mind, he was still on Saturday Night Live when they were making this movie, so, I mean, nobody really knew exactly what to do with him after the success of Weird Science, and instead of letting him branch his career out a little bit before tackling a big drama a big action film like this, which this is really an action film, it's more of it's kind of an action film, a crime film, if you will. I mean, it just didn't work because he was just way too young to be playing this role in general. I feel like if you had made this movie a couple years down the road, I mean, you probably would have had something much better than this, and, it was one of those things where there was a lot of clashing behind the scenes between the director and Anthony Michael Hall, and a lot of people were really getting into Michael Hall because he was being called either the Brad or Anthony Michael Moron. So yeah, a movie like this obviously is not going to play very well in general, and sadly it does not. But it does have a killer soundtrack though, so hey, you sell the soundtrack, that's about as good as making the movie a success, I guess. But yeah, in the end, it just didn't work when it was all said and done. And, it kind of, I feel like it did kind of hurt up a little bit of Anthony Michael Hall's career after this. But, I mean, he would come back after this with Johnny Be Good, Edward Scissorhands. So, I mean, but this was kind of a killer in his early part of his career in general. So, but, yeah, that's all I got to say about that one, Out of Bounds. And thus, with all that said, we wrap up another episode of Time About the Movies Flashback. We'll flashback to July 18th, 1986, with probably one of the best sequels, the best sequel of 1986, and one of the best sequels of all time, of course, James Cameron's Aliens, the sequel, of course, to Alien. But we also have Grace Jones in the vampire comedy Vamp, and also the infamous Roman Polanski flop with Walter Matthau, Pirates. So we'll take a look at those three films. That'll be coming up next week on the show, so stay tuned for that. But with all that said, thank you so much for watching this, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please go ahead and do me the honors of hitting the like button, subscribe button, notification button, and check out the last episode we did, and also our playlist as well. So with all that said, I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Take care.